Bush camping. I haven't shared this story with anyone before. In fact, I'd forgotten all about it myself until recently. I was helping my dad clean out the garage and saw our old tents stacked in the corner, and a whole lot of memories came flooding back. Isn't it strange how that happens? How we can just make ourselves forget things? Kids are especially good at it. It makes me wonder what else might have happened in my past that I just can't remember, that I didn't understand, so I just forgot. Anyway, here goes. My family wasn't big into camping. We lived in a house in the suburbs, near where my parents had grown up. My dad would grudgingly do basic yard maintenance, but it was obvious he didn't find much pleasure in nature. His world was one of books and quiet, indoor comforts. Our holidays usually consisted of staying in small, simple cottages by the beach somewhere, so it was surprising when one summer my parents announced we were going camping. I think my sister and I were both excited. Our only previous experience of camping had been setting up a small tent in the backyard, sleeping outside until we got too bored or cold. I think my parents had it in their minds that camping in the bush was an Australian rite of passage that every child had to experience. I can't remember where we went, but I remember that the drive there felt like it took forever. It must have been a few hours away at least. It must not have been a very popular campsite, because it was unusually quiet for summer, now that I think back on it. The campsite had barbecues and a small playground, and was near a river. I remember walking along the river with my sister. We found a small waterfall and pool to splash around in. I can't remember our parents being with us, but we were young. Maybe 7 and 9 years old, so they must have been. I remember we made friends with a young boy around our age at that waterfall. He said he wasn't there on holiday, that he lived there all the time. I remember it being hot. We had cold showers at the campsite or swam in the river to cool down. I remember the flies and the mosquitoes, and I remember my father spraying bug spray enthusiastically until we were all practically choking on it. We had sausages for most of the meals. They were easy to cook on a barbecue. We had a small campfire, although it was just for novelty rather than light or cooking. My sister and I roasted marshmallows on it, because that's what they did with campfires in movies. In the evening, my mother would tell stories while we were all around the campfire. I could never decide whether she was making these stories up completely or whether some of them were real. I remember one about a big cat-like animal, maybe a black panther, that had been sighted in the area and was apparently still out there. I stared out into the bush and imagined it looking back at me. Another story was about a gang of children living in the bush. Kids that had been lost, left behind, disappeared. It all started with one boy, whose family abandoned him while they were camping. The gang would kidnap new children from their families, who would never see them again. This one appealed to me. It reminded me of Peter Pan. I imagined they lived in an elaborate community of tree houses. At night, my parents shared a tent, and my sister and I were in another. We'd stay up even later, eating the lollies we'd brought with us, playing card games and giggling about who knows what. The first night, I could barely sleep. I was kept awake by unusual sounds, the wind, the rustling of the leaves, the animals. At one point, I heard something moving around the tent. I thought I could hear whispering. I was paralyzed with fear. I tried to silence my breathing and lie as still as possible. I think I hid in my sleeping bag before eventually falling to sleep. In the morning, we woke up to find things in our campsite had been disturbed. Our chairs were knocked over. The stack of logs we had for the fire were missing. My parents told us it must have been a wombat, or something other curious nighttime animals and such. It seemed plausible enough. I remember that we spent a lot of time complaining on this holiday. Complaining it was too hot, we were bored, hungry. I remember my sister got angry at me because I didn't want to play with her. I brought my Game Boy with me, which was more entertaining than her. She kept wanting to go back to the river to find the boy that we'd play with, to find more pools or waterfalls. She said that she wanted to find the boy's friends, that he promised he would show us his camp. My parents were reading, and I was playing on my Game Boy. She kept trying to tug me to get my attention. I told her just to go away. I think she knocked over one of my parents' drinks at one point, and they were angry at her. Eventually, my parents yelled at her to stop and go play with herself. She sulked the rest of the day. One night, near the end of the trip, I woke up with a start. Although I'm not sure what had woken me, it seemed quiet. The tent was dark. I struggled to turn my torch on. I'd always been afraid of the dark. In my room at home, I was afraid of turning on the light and seeing something in my room. I had the same fear in the tent. But I'd turn on my torch and there would be something there. Maybe a monster, a vampire, an animal, or maybe just a person. This time, there was no one. I tried to close my eyes and go back to sleep. But for some reason, I was sure that there was something outside the tent. I swung my torch over the bushes and saw movement. I saw a flash of red, and my breathing stopped. Big red eyes under a red baseball cap looking out at me. Then were gone. I heard my sister whisper my name from inside the tent. I'd woken her up. She seemed excited when I told her about it. She wanted to go out and find the kid. I knew I'd seen something, but I wrote it off as a kid staying in the campsite trying to play a trick on us. It seemed plausible enough, and I was tired. So I went back to sleep. I thought my sister did too. I remember, afterwards, that I kept asking people why'd they taken her and not me. No one ever gave me an answer. But my parents, Not the search and rescue team. Not the police. They kept telling me that she'd wandered off and gotten lost. It happened all the time in the Australian bush. It was an accident. Tragedy. It definitely wasn't my fault. No one could have prevented it. She couldn't possibly be still alive. Eventually, I started to believe them, and I forgot everything else. Is she still out there?